Welcome to Northwest Profiles, a look at people, places, and events of interest in the inland Northwest.
The rain and the night together came down, and the wind came after, bending the props of the pine tree roof and snapping many a rafter. I crept along in the darkness, stunned and bruised and blinded, crept to a fir with thick-set boughs and a sheltering rock behind it. There, from the blowing and raining, crouching, I sought to hide me. Something rustled. 2 green eyes shone, and a wolf lay down beside me. His wet fur pressed against me. Each of us warmed the other. Each of us felt, in the stormy dark, that beast and man was brother.
It's often been said that one creative idea will eventually lead to another. So it was when this reflective little-known poem written in the early 1900s inspired this handsome bronze sculpture over a half a century later.
I found this old poem in a book, the only place I ever saw it printed, and I thought it was a nice idea, and so I just did it. An idea hits you, you never know when it's going to hit you. I don't know if that works for other people or not, but I'm sure it does sometimes.
Meet Bill Ohrmann. By trade, he's a cattle rancher, but at heart, he's an extremely gifted artist. Whether made from wood, wax, or clay, Bill's finely crafted work has established him as one of the country's top sculptors in the Western field. A familiar field to a man who has lived the frontier life for over 70 years in western Montana. Born in 1919, Bill grew up on a ranch in the hills northeast of Missoula near the small town of Ovando, a jumping-off spot into the scenic beauty of the Bob Marshall Wilderness area.
If I'd grown up in New York, I'm sure I wouldn't be doing the things I do now. It seems like growing up in Montana, it seems to have made a lot of artists. My dad would, we were living back there in the backwoods, and my dad would carve me out of apple box little animals out of that. Maybe that influenced me. He'd whittle them out with a jackknife, and so who knows? Maybe that kind of triggered it, and I thought I could do it then.
And indeed he could. Following his father's lead, and with only trial and error to guide him, Bill Ohrmann began to explore and develop his own creative talent.
It's probably a gift, and maybe it's a gift to have the incentive to do it too. Maybe that's as much as the gift of being able to do it. But I just always liked to do the draw and carve and things like that, and that's the training I had.
As one might expect, Bill's early carvings were generally very simple. However, with the passage of time, his work, like himself, began to mature and eventually evolve into something uniquely different.
I do different things than other artists do. I do a lot of Western things, but I do some things that have really never been done before. Everybody's done an elk or a bugling elk or painted a picture of a horse standing by a cabin. I don't know of any artist who hasn't done those things. But my work's a lot more complicated than any other wood carvings I've ever seen. Most wood carvings is one figure standing there kind of stiff. I put in so many figures in one piece of wood, all carved out of one piece of wood.
Along with sculpting, Bill's creative spirit has also from time to time expressed itself on canvas in oil and watercolors. Yet despite these minor artistic detours, his creative yearnings have always led him back to sculpting and his favorite medium, wood.
The wood I use mostly is cottonwood, although any wood works. But, if I had my choice of woods in the world, I don't suppose I'd use cottonwood. I'd rather use walnut or something like that. But cottonwood works for me. It's so available in big chunks. All those trees down on the river, those big tall ones, are all cottonwoods. And my neighbors are good. If a beaver cuts one down or they blow over, they let me know, and I get chunks. It's like an Eskimo. He uses the ivory that's available to him to carve, and that's kind of the way I am.
Like any significant art form, Bill's elaborate wood carvings require careful planning. But at the same time, they also demand the artist be in good physical condition.
When I start a wood carving like this, I have to have the idea first. That's the most important part. Then I make a bunch of sketches, and because I don't want any mistakes after, if I can avoid it. So they just aren't accidents that grow out of a piece of wood. I really definitely try to make the piece of wood into what I want it to be. If I was going to make a bear, I would really roughly draw him on here. And then I'd take the axe and I'd work all this away and kind of block him out with my chisels and the axe. I'd get rid of a lot of this wood outside here, and then I'd take it in where I have smaller chisels and a mallet and work the wood away with that. And just keep working in until bear comes out of there. I do all the rough carving on the piece of wood, carve all the legs out and the head and all that real roughly while the wood is green, and then I have to leave it dry for about 2 months before I can do the finishing detail on it. It's going to be okay today, huh?
Bill carved his first wooden figure while in grade school. For the next 40 years, in between running a ranch, he toiled and perfected his craft in relative obscurity. Then in 1971, at the age of 52, Bill was offered a chance to exhibit his sculptures at the celebrated Whitney Gallery of Western Art in Cody, Wyoming. Not surprising, the exhibit was a huge success, and one that encouraged Bill to focus more of his attention on his artwork. The result? A flourishing career that over the last 2 decades has produced hundreds of imaginative wood carvings, as well as waxworks that have been cast in bronze, all of which were inspired by Bill's passionate love of the frontier West.
Tom Horn was a bounty hunter in Johnson County Wars in Wyoming, and he went out to clean the range of rustlers, and he did it. His reputation was so fierce, I guess you'd say, that when they heard he was in the country, they all left the country. He never brought anybody in alive, but he met a bad end. In 1903, he was hanged because he accidentally killed a teenager. We call this one Night because the owls, and these are the kind of people you see at night out there. It's really one of those pieces that's fun to do, too. I didn't feel under any pressure to do it, just did it and hoped it worked out, and I thought it worked out fairly well.
Now in his mid-70s, Bill Ohrmann today still remains active, operating a 1,000-acre ranch near Drummond, Montana. However, as far as his artwork is concerned, Bill readily admits he is no longer the prolific artist he once was.
I've slowed down on doing a lot of the wood carving. But, there's this time in your life you get sought in your ways, and I just wonder if I'm not kind of sought in my ways now and have to stick with what I got.
Despite lacking the physical stamina and steadiness to carve in wood as he once did, the creative fire within Bill Ohrmann still burns brightly, and fortunately has found a way to express it through a new medium, an artificial clay called polyform. Currently, one of his humorous polyform sculptures is on display at the Elk Foundation in Missoula, Montana.
A few years ago in Drummond, a little bear cub came down and ran up a tree in Drummond, and of course 100 people gathered around it, and the sheriff came, and the bear started down the tree to get away, so he shot it. And so this piece I made just had a bunch of people around little bear, and some people find it very humorous, but other people say, well, that's sad. They see how foolish they look when 50 of them gather around a helpless animal and cause it to die is what they do.
Unfortunately, like the bear, the frontier life Bill Ohrmann knows so well and has so fondly captured in his sculptures is also dying. It's a notion not lost on a man who has witnessed the changes firsthand and who feels his one-of-a-kind sculptures might someday be only a reminder of a way of life long since past.
I think right now Montana is changing for the worse, just as drastic as it was when the buffalo disappeared, because of people flocking in buying land from other states. Ranches that we thought were here forever all of a sudden are subdivided up into little 20-acre chunks. And although people in urban areas look at ranchers and say, oh, they're degrading the water, they're degrading this, they're grazing off the Forest Service, those are such minor things compared to taking great chunks of land and building houses on them. Why, there's no comparison to it. We look back at Charlie Russell now and Remington, and they were showing it was changing for them too, right at that moment. And I think maybe the next generation will look back and say, well, yes, I was showing something too.
If you have a topic for Northwest Profiles, send it to KSPS TV, 3911 South Regal, Spokane, Washington, 99223. Northwest Profiles is a presentation of KSPS Public Television.